Nobody wants to fail in full view, especially property team members who don't get a chance to collide with the corporate staff because they're undistributed. They don't want that. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want to have an additional opportunity to look bad. They don't want that. So you paint the picture of what good can look like. This is going to mean this for you. We're going to hand off qualified leads to you. No longer going to be in a conversation for an hour only to find that somebody's not qualified to rent a Class A. And you start to tether to the things that they care about. Owning your footprint is really important. Finding a really strong third-party partner who can help reduce your dependence on ILSs is critical. Somebody who's mobile first, that understands kind of the ever-shifting landscape of doing that well, and really can make sure that you're always competing.
Welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, I feel like we're finally getting back on schedule. Meaning it's a Monday. There's a recording happening. We had a guest. All's right with the world.
Just in time for the holidays.
Just in time to go offline for like 3 weeks.
To get right back off schedule.
Yeah, and then fall behind and not have anything booked, and Erica freak out and say like, you gotta record something.
Kind of par for the course. But excited that, we have a new addition to the marketing team. It's going to be an incredible tag team up at the top, I'll say, with Trevor and with Olivia. And so I have a feeling he's going to keep us honest.
Totally.
And have a lot more guests, for us to tap into. But today was a great one. Really enjoyed hearing Dustin throw down some knowledge. I think that's also the least amount of questions we've ever asked in a podcast. I think we only got 2 or 3 in. But that tells you all the info in his brain. And I think he's starting to make a name for himself, in particular for the switch off of the ILS, as he said, kind of branded ILS independent. But some great work that they've done over there, very forward thinking. And now, he's super excited about, the transition to centralization at Mark Taylor. So I thought it was, super informative.
Well, to close the loop on your comment, for those that don't know, we just brought on Trevor Park as our VP of marketing. So he joined us like 2 hours ago. So we still got to get him settled in, but we'll definitely have him on the podcast soon. And like you said, he'll be bringing we've had him on a number of times, and he has a ton of guests that he'll definitely help organize and get us on track. And then, having Dustin here from Mark Taylor is so excited because Kirina, he was one of her references, I remember, and the way he did his reference letter when we were bringing on Kirina just really struck me. Where it shows that if you write the right reference letter, it embeds in the person's mind and rubs off even on you, the person writing the letter, not just the person you're giving accolades to. And so I'd been excited to talk to him since I'd read that letter, and then we bumped into each other a couple times through the conference circuit this year. But he's often being featured on different panels and stuff, so we didn't get to connect in depth like we did here. So after we asked him what are his 3 chapters at Mark Taylor so far, we only had time to really get into chapter 1, which was, as you were saying, ILS independence, which is probably amusing to him because, as he said, that was back in 2018. It's like now he's getting all these people interested in that, just 5 years removed to help them with that. So that shows you how far behind the industry typically runs. And then I bet he's going to be 5 years in front of this whole centralization, from a lead handling and lead flow and resident experience side of things too. So
yeah, totally. What I wanted to get to with him, and I was trying to seed it a little bit when I said, is there a point you'd ever revisit ILSs? And he did say that they strategically use them here and there. If one of their properties needs a boost, maybe, just coming online. I forget the use case that he offered up, but is it all or nothing? And I think that's where the industry seems to be right now. In many cases, it's like, no, we're fully committed. We still spend, a good amount on apartments.com and maybe do some performance, or, we're trying to get rid of that and move fully into, Google, Facebook, whatever, digital advertising. And I like to believe that there is, middle ground there. And I'm curious. Yeah, I would be curious, I guess, to talk to Dustin a little bit more about that, as far as just a different strategy with ILS versus, either your air quotes all in, like meaning kind of what's normal, or you don't do it at all.
Well, they've been masters. Give credit to the ILSs here. They've been masters of working their agreements and seeding that fear and anxiety on the marketplace about like, well, if you just keep one property on, we're going to double your rate. And so then they're like, well, I'll go ahead and commit to 70 properties because I don't want to have my one property's rate double. And it's like, really, how's this math work out? And he made the point. He's like, he moved $4.5 million off of them. And then he still said, though, on occasion they struggle with lead volume, and then they'll jump into an ILS for a time and then get back out of it. So I loved, I think to your point, a lot of times this industry often thinks like it's all or nothing, which is probably healthy, because if you it's kind of like you with the 4-day work week here, you're like, let's not pretend we're just like, tiptoeing into this. Otherwise we won't really commit.
Mhm.
So I think it's healthy to really commit into something, but then come back with an exception versus making the exception the rule, which we've even fallen into traps of here at Digible, where we make all these rules or, best practices sort of accounting for the 1% exception versus like, no, just make this the rule. Then once in a while it'll fall outside the rule.
Yeah, totally. I was surprised that it was more of a rip the Band-Aid. That was the other thing that stood out for me. It seems like with that big of a change, everything that's at stake, that you would be required by a C-suite, we'll say,
Yeah.
to prove that theory out. And especially with owned and operated, that's supposed to be one of the luxuries, right? As you can manage kind of different cohorts, do A/B testing with, maybe 6 to 10 assets, for example, have a control group and all the rest. But I love how committed he was. And obviously he had buy-in at the top, with John, and was able to, prove that it was the right strategy. I mean, there was some staggering, and he gets into that a little bit more in the podcast, so you can listen to how he approached it. But for those that, are ruminating on this concept, this is a great podcast for you to tune into.
Yeah. Last thing for me, before we roll into the episode is I loved his quote that he spoke to multifamily really wants confidence. And the way he was using that quote, to me, how I interpreted it is, a lot of times we're like, well, shoot, when you look at this isolated case, it doesn't make sense why we have this tech stack, or we're spending on this, or we're doing that. It's kind of like the blanket, we're going to put rep.com on everything. But when you back up to 10,000 feet or whatever, and you're like, well, if you have 70 properties, it's just way better, easier to just say, we'll put rep.com on everything. And there'll be the one exception property that maybe it's not a great fit for, but so be it. Right. And I think that his quote there about multifamily wants confidence speaks to that to me, where they just want to know it's handled. And sometimes it means they're less efficient, but maybe less efficient on the dollar to dollar cost line. However, in the aggregate, they're more efficient because they just have it handled. So I don't know. I like that one.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I'm sure you guys are going to get something out of this. He dropped so many nuggets, particularly in that first 15 minutes. So, yeah, tune in and enjoy. Okay, we're here with Dustin Lacey from Mark Taylor. Dustin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, Dustin Lacey here, as indicated, Vice President of Marketing and Technology here at Mark Taylor Residential in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome.
Welcome to yourself. Yeah. Cool. So Dustin, you've been with, do you guys always say the whole Mark Taylor, or do you say MT? What do you guys do?
MTR. Typically.
MTR?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now I'm an insider. You've been with MTR for how
long? So this is going to be year 8.
Okay.
And I didn't have multifamily experience, so I came in from American manufacturing. I worked in oil and gas, semiconductor and solar. And then most recently, I oversaw a business group within an irrigation company called Rainbird.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited to talk to you. One, because Karina, who had worked with you at Mark Taylor, has said so many good things about Dustin, but also a lot of what Karina has talked about to me specifically has been, I guess I'll call it a lot of the change management that you've helped lead up there at Mark Taylor over those 8 years. So would you give us a little bit maybe of if you were going to do your 8 years in 3 chapters, how you would talk about those projects that you've spearheaded?
Wow, that's good. They brought me in because we had American manufacturing, you have a data kind of centric approach because of just the constant encroachment of international manufacturing. And if you manufacture stateside, erring on a business decision can have broad implications. And as margins kind of compress, you're putting yourself at risk if you're not relying heavily on data. So when Mark Taylor pulled me into multifamily, and I'd lived in a Mark Taylor, I'm a Arizona graduate. We've got 3 teams in the top 20 right now, which is unusual, which is why I note it and why I'm also happy about it. But
Would that be all Arizona teams?
Arizona Wildcats.
Dustin, okay.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
wanted to know if we're talking strictly
Yeah.
Wildcats or if you're looping in some of the other colleges.
Yeah. No. We're doing well. And so I joined at a time when we were looking to make a pivot. We were at that time managing A and B assets. We are a owner operator. Mark Taylor is founded in '85 by Jeff and Scott. We manage about 30,000 Class A units today. At the time I was brought in, we were managing B as well, and moved to an exclusively Class A posture. About a little under a third of our units are our own properties, and we manage fee-based as well for the balance of communities here in Arizona and Phoenix. And in 17, when I joined, we were looking to really start to evaluate alternative marketing approaches to kind of what is the standard approach within multifamily, even today, which is ILS heavy spend. And when you consider the fact that lead gen is kind of the lifeblood of your community from a occupancy, rent growth, et cetera standpoint, the more control you can have there, the better. So chapter 1 was really about spending a year evaluating the true value of what we were currently doing from marketing perspective, auditing, learning the industry, learning Mark Taylor. And then the decision was taken shortly thereafter to move off of ILSs altogether. So we knew that we wanted to bring in our own marketing function internally, manage that lead gen piece specifically. So the first bite we took was establishing a dual website footprint with marktaylor.com operating as a private ILS in essence. And at that time, we used to get all of the unique, we were a heavy ILS user, right? We were spending, I believe, 15, this is 2017 numbers, obviously much higher now, but I think we were spending just under $2,000 a month per property with apartments.com. We were on RentPath, we were on Apartment Guide, we were on Zillow. We were spending quite a bit of money. And so the specter of this notion that perhaps we could own our lead gen and drive out cost was very attractive. It's not very common though. So it was a bit of a risk. Our departure conversations with the ILSs, who I think had enjoyed a very long and prosperous relationship with Mark Taylor up to that point. I think that it was quite a surprise. And we caveated the conversation with, hey, and the powder's still dry. You guys will be available to us. We hope. We think we've departed on amicable terms. So you guys, if we need you, we'll call you. So we did that in 18, and we timed it with the creation of our new marktaylor.com and standalone websites for our properties. So today, each property enjoys a property listing on marktaylor.com and then has its own domain and own property website that is mobile centric, right? Google started indexing mobile first in 18, I believe in March or May of 18. And we knew we needed not the best looking sites, perhaps, although we're proud of what our sites look like, but they're certainly not festooned with a bunch of bullshit. They're built specifically to meet the needs of, honestly, Google, right? So we spend a lot of time evaluating accessibility, SEO, performance, page, all the different things that they care about. And, you guys certainly know this, but Google's refactoring their search algorithm every day, a couple of times a day on average, based on the limited information they allow us. And so we knew we had to get really good at producing sites that were fast on mobile. At that time, I believe 40% of traffic, mobile traffic, still matriculated on 3G, which is, just a step up from dial-up. So you didn't have the luxury of requiring a prospect to load a pre-rolled video above the fold or any of that stuff. And so we were doing all of that, and it looked good if you had a great connection. But truly, that wasn't the reality. Most folks, 76% of our traffic arrives via mobile device. Of that, 72% are iPhones specifically. So our thought was, hey, if we step off of ILSs, this is chapter 1 still, we've got to be able to generate the requisite leads to satisfy the leasing appetite for each of our properties individually. So bringing in-house ad strategists and dedicated account managers was also a requirement to this. We found that when you were sourcing third-party for ads, it could be challenging. This is our own experience. I know you guys offer this service and do it quite well, as evidenced by your client set. But for us, we had local folks who may or may not have had competing interests, right? And so, in essence, they could play kingmaker on any given day as to who was going to be generating leads, because we know, based on CoStar data, that on any given day in Phoenix, only 8 to 10% of the available, they who are searching for apartments, can even afford a Class A community. We don't have the luxury of not doing these things well. So we deployed dual website footprint. Both of them were mobile centric. Started to own our lead gen, and quickly realized after we were fortunate enough to succeed there and successfully move off ILSs, we realized that lead management had to be next. We at that time utilized a tracking number platform called Leasehawk. I think they're probably still the dominant provider in the space within nationally here in the U.S. And in 2017, they used to come in and they'd bring us nice gifts. Mueller's team is a great team, and they'd always extend all these plaudits as to how we're doing. And I finally was just like, after all the back patting, and they'd be like, you guys are top 3 in the country for a portfolio this size, and we felt great. And finally, I was just like, what is our call answer rate? Truly, during operating hours, and then full, right, including after hours. And it was around 51%. And so in that first year, as I alluded to, we took a deep dive into our cost per lead, cost per lease. We really wanted to understand customer journey. This notion of reinforcing buying decision and reducing barriers to intent was really important for us. That's really what fed the UI UX piece of our websites. We really wanted folks to get where they wanted to as quickly as possible. So enabling to do that instead of creating obstacles with websites that probably weren't, thoughtfully conceived was a non-starter for us. And in the process of doing that, we recognized that our cost per lead was $70 to $700 per lead, not even per lease, but per lead. And so here we'd stripped out all of this cost, which in today's terms, 2023 terms, is about $4.5 million in ILS spend. Reallocated a portion of that to paid campaigns, paid search, PPC, remarketing, geo, etc. We recognized that we were still falling down from a lead gen standpoint. So that brings me up to chapter 2. Chapter 2 was really kind of the genesis story for Centralized for us. Here we were now creating a healthy, consistent, peace of mind inducing lead gen engine, but we weren't answering our phones at the rate we needed to. And we figured that out when we took a deep dive in the probability of converting a lead to a lease based on whether we had answered the call or not. So when we answer a call, today's terms, if we answer a lead call, we have a probability of converting it to a lease that's near 40%. If we don't answer said lead call, our probability of converting to a lease is less than 2%. It's almost not even worth calling folks back or working those leads. It became very apparent that we needed to solve for lead management. So we embarked on this centralized approach wherein we have established pods of 3 properties, identified really good leasing team members, created additional career pathways for individuals. It's no longer just about becoming, starting as a leasing consultant, moving to a senior leasing consultant, moving to an assistant manager, moving to a manager, and then, the holy grail perhaps is corporate. now we've got this additional tree of opportunity for folks, which has proven to be very, very helpful. And I'll speak more to that in chapter 3. But we identified these successful leasing individuals, allocated 3 properties to each individual, and then started answering phones at a more regular basis. And again, it turns out when you answer your phones, you drive out costs, and you create a more favorable impression for prospects. You improve the probability of converting to a lease. These are all super valuable for us, especially today, given all that we're kind of facing as we step outside of the last decade of abundance in terms of lead gen for multifamily. You know, it's pretty stark what 23 and 24 look like relative to, 20 and 21, even during the COVID era. So we started answering our phones, right? We created this centralized focus. We secured a second building, placed folks in it, and outfitted them with software. We're on the Union platform, which is purpose-built for Centralized specifically, a consolidated dashboard. And we started to create additional channels as well when we recognized that self-servicing as a behavior became more prominent with our target demographic. So we're talking about AI chat tooling specifically, deployed that to our websites, allowed folks to schedule self-guided tours, and really recognize what Jay Parsons from, I believe he's from RealPage, recently wrote about on LinkedIn, where he said that upwards of 70+% of U.S. residents, irrespective, or multifamily residents, irrespective of class type, prefer 0 touches with their property team. And so at that time, we didn't have that data, but we were recognizing that, hey, if you can enable folks and create and allow them immediacy in terms of self-servicing, they're going to opt in for that. They're actually going to like that. And in parallel, what we started to notice was that you go to your Home Depots and your Walmarts, your Targets, and they too had self-servicing. And so we kind of, were timely there and got lucky. And so we started with lead gen, right? So chapter 2 is really about lead gen, perfecting that, understanding what that looks like, making sure we had software that met the need of the moment, that allowed an individual to field calls and inbounds, because we have live agent chat from our chat tooling. So if you don't want to talk to an AI chatbot, you can actually talk to one of our concierge live. What we recognized was folks actually quite like this. And from a conversion standpoint, we're converting at the same rate or better relative to our on-prem management of the process. And so with these distributed workforces where you've got 90+ properties like we do, it's very difficult when you consider the turnover rates at the entry-level positions, both on leasing and on maintenance, are very high in our industry. It can range from 30 to 60+% for leasing consultant and service technician. These are high turnover roles, and oftentimes the lead management piece can fall to your greenest individual or your newest person. So not only are they not seasoned, they're brand new. They're probably just learning the industry, learning their community, and learning Mark Taylor. But you are requiring of them to manage a very precious asset, which is your leads. And so when we started to take over lead management, it proved valuable from a call answer standpoint. We moved from a portfolio average of 52%, upwards of 90+% from a call answer rate for in hours. When you factor in full day, when you don't have somebody answering, obviously that brings that down. But that was a material change that impacted our costs and our conversion rates sizably. So chapter 2 was really about that. And then chapter 3 really started during COVID, when we closed all of our communities down as required by our governor. And we were deemed an essential service as property managers here in Arizona, and Governor Ducey allowed us to continue to go to work, but we couldn't keep our offices open. And when we did that, we thought that there would be a significant outcry, and there was, around the amenities like pool and gym specifically. And I understand that, because that would have sucked. I'm paying full freight, and now I don't have access to key aspects of the value proposition. But that was out of our hands. But what we learned was that, hey, even though our office was closed, if we allow our residents the ability to schedule an appointment with us versus the walk-in scenario, which is most common, we have time to prepare for that conversation and give dedicated time to that individual. In fact, we're able to improve their experience, which certainly reinforces buying decision, improves our retention rates, and makes them happier in the end. And we know this because we survey them. And so that was heartening for us. So simultaneous to these kind of learnings that started to percolate as a consequence of this variable, this COVID variable, for which none of us had that in our kind of our business model. We recognized we needed a full stop CRM that allowed us to, at any given point, understand, the key performance metrics that really mattered for us. Not just call answer rates, but conversion rates of lead to lease, lead to tour, engagement rates. We have a sub 2 hour engagement rate requirement, meaning if somebody emails you, you need to be in touch with them via phone first. If they don't answer, text message, email within 2 hours. It's critical. Again, back to the point I alluded to earlier, only 8 to 10% of folks search for apartments in Phoenix can even afford a Mark Taylor. We don't have the luxury of taking a passive approach here. And so we deployed a CRM. And you mentioned Karina, pronouncing her name perfectly, by the way. You guys are good.
Thank you.
She led that rollout, actually, for us and did an incredible job. I believe lockdowns hit March 11th of 2020, and we rolled out the CRM the following week in 5 business days. Karina did that.
Wow.
And that proved to be incredibly valuable for us. So, now you have a consolidated cockpit from a reporting perspective that allows us to really ensure that we're doing all these things really well. Because even though we had our offices locked, we still had people on-prem, right? And so as we're kind of cultivating the centralized approach, which we hadn't yet rolled out, we still needed folks managing leads thoughtfully. So the CRM proved to be very valuable for us. We do all of the call scoring and all the different data capture that's important to understand what's going on, so that at the end of the day, and this is important, I think anybody from multifamily that's listening would agree with this. We just seek peace of mind at the end of the day. And it's very difficult with distributed workforces to really have confidence and certainty around delivery. And, once we launched our CRM, we really started to understand that we could do this. Maybe this centralized approach, even though nobody else really appears to be doing it this way outside of, Jim Restell and Portland and a few other folks, Suzanne Hobson out in North Carolina and TriCap. Those folks have been very thoughtful. Irvine Companies had some self-guided touring. Well, I mean, there's some folks that had towed the water and taken pieces of it. So at that time, we felt very comfortable with our lead gen and lead management piece, and we branched into resident management. Resident management, if you look at the total engagement for any given property, it makes up about 60 to 70% of engagement for a concierge or a property team. So if you're thinking about how they're allocating or the utilization of your property team members, if it's anywhere close to what we're seeing, it's roughly 60% resident, 70% resident, and the balance is on lead management when you're talking about the management of prospect and resident. So we knew this was going to be a bigger bite. We knew this was going to entail some additional requirements for a concierge. They needed to be fully fluent in the properties that they oversaw. They needed software that would allow them to answer questions in real time, absent, full fluency around that property. There's given days where our concierge may have never been to any of these 3 properties they're managed. So we deployed our generative AI chat tooling to the back end and listened to all of our calls and do all these really fun things that surface answers in real time, whether they're on the phone, penning an email. We generate all of that for them so as to create efficiency for them because of the diversity of things they may confront as a concierge from a centralized standpoint. So for us, chapter 3 has really been about perfecting a handful of key areas. The lead gen piece, which I've discussed, lead management, which I discussed, resident management, which I just hit on, IT, accounting, collections, and then the big bite, for which we are still pushing a lot of effort towards. I mean, all of it still, but service and maintenance have been kind of the biggest challenge because there's just so many different factors that impact performance there. And so originally when we, embarked on this chapter 3 efforting where we were going to take the whole bite from a centralized service standpoint, and we knew maintenance would be difficult. But I think that we've been, we were right. It's been very difficult. Where we've seen real impact to payroll and performance on the leasing services side, the maintenance services side is more about creating efficiencies. And we're still mid-stride and kind of, fully forming our approach there. Fortunately, we have some good partners. We're on the happy product from the service side. But that brings us up to current 3 pods of 3 or 4. I think we're on our 4th pod of 3 properties. We have fully closed properties. I think our chapter 4 is going to be really interesting because unbeknownst to us at the time, the feasibility of closing a Class A community in full from a leasing offices standpoint seemed out of reach, right? Certainly because we refuse to offer less than a white glove experience. And yes, we fall down all over the place, just like anybody else for all of the reasons that I indicated to you guys. But today we're operating a handful of closed Class A communities. Did we have a few property residents cry foul when we announced that we were doing this? Almost a pseudo return to the COVID era, because we have since reopened our leasing offices. Just for background, and the answer is yeah, we had 5 or 6 on each of these properties that were like, "Hey, I really enjoy coming in and chatting with your property teams." And I said, I get that because I would be one of those people because I like to chat, and that would have been a bit of a loss. But for the vast majority of our residents, a fully closed leasing office, as long as they are enabled and have immediacy around what they need to do, meaning your resident portal offers them all of the abilities to submit a service request, pay a bill, do those different things. It really is a viable approach. And so chapter 4 for us is really about extracting as much value from the centralized model as possible, and seeing how far we can take this without reducing our performance, not only from the resident prospect standpoint, but just overall operationally. And so far we've been successful. Certainly had many hiccups, but we're excited about the future. So that's chapters 1 through 3, boys.
Yeah, well, I like that chapter 1 and 2 felt like meaty. It's like, or like very precise. It's like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And then when you got to chapter 3, you're like, you know what? I'll just put the next trilogy all into this one book and not write 6 books. Anyways, just giving you a hard time.
No, I get it. Well, there's a lot there. We can unpack it, but you're right. There is a lot there. I just don't want to bore the listener too much. I'm working really hard on my uhs and ums just so I can not belabor somebody's eardrums too much. But yeah, chapter 3 has been a big bite. I'll say this. Here's how we know it's working. Obviously, I've hit some of the key success metrics like engagement rates, call answer rates. We survey, so we're constantly checking. We utilize Jay Turner for surveying both prospect and residents. So we get to the benefit of benchmark data relative to our marketplace and nationally, as well as what we've done ourselves portfolio-wise. And, the numbers don't lie. We're seeing improved customer satisfaction scores, if you will. We've moved into top 20 Aura score for a portfolio of our size. While Karina was here, she launched our review and reputation efforts. She's that good, for folks that are wondering. So congratulations to Digible. And we now operate full portfolio 4.0 and above. on average for review and rep, which you guys know has really strong implications from an SEO standpoint in particular, but also voice of customer is very important. Social proof is very important for prospects. But, there's still a lot left to do. And I can unpack whatever you guys want to relative to chapter 4, and we can get into it a little further if you'd like.
Well, let's first back up to chapter 1.
Sure.
Reid, I figure I tossed it to you because this has been something that's been near and dear to you over the years, as far as like removing the ILS, or what would that experiment look like, possibly internalizing the marketing, yada, yada. So it's just thought you might want to dive in there.
Yeah, well, a lot of companies, I think at this point, have tried and at the very least have talked about it. And so I'm curious how you kind of set the whole thing up. Did you rip off the Band-Aid? Did you stagger it, so that you could prove, hey, let's do this with, 10 or 20% of our portfolio before, we make the bigger move? And then is there a point where you mentioned that the powder is still dry and that you might call them back?
Mm-hmm.
Are you has that ship sailed? Or, as modern as you guys are and the change agent, would you ever look at the ILSs again? Or is it almost a cultural, element now,
Yeah.
source of pride to a degree? But yeah, the beginning of that was just, how did you approach the first 3 to 6 months as you were preparing for this big move?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll hit the second 1B first. It's certainly a brand now for us, this ILS independence, because it is unusual. We talk quite a bit about it with prospective clients. It is seen as a value. Our marketing costs per unit annualized are materially less than competitors. We underwrite a lot of the deals here in the Phoenix marketplace, so we have true apples to apple data. But it doesn't mean that there's no pride in kind of authorship here. We will do what we have to. We're not bigger than the market, and we'll do what we need to. So have there been instances where we deployed, a rent.com spend or an apartments.com spend? Certainly. It's often when a new client who is perhaps unfamiliar with our approach and not yet trusting of it, particularly in the lease up period, says, hey, it won't hurt. We've got, we budgeted for this anyway. So yeah, we work for somebody, certainly. So we're obligated. But it's very rare and very unusual. But we've done it a handful of times. We have nothing negative to say about them. We recognize they play a very important role in our marketplace. But for us, it's about doing the same with less money. And we've been able to successfully do that and haven't had to backslide or return, knock on wood. Now, the caveat being that we know there is change coming relative to Google and how they handle their availability listing. So today, the multifamily approach that Google employs is much like what they did for travel about 6 or 7 years ago. And for anybody that searched for flights on Google now knows, then they'll still surface in organic and in ads, your kayaks, your Travelocities. But what they also service front and center, which has reduced the available organic page real estate, is their own travel module. And so we know that that's coming for multifamily, wherein Google's going to cut out ILSs or partner with them. We'll see how this works. And we've talked to the various ILSs about it, and they've confirmed our suspicion. But we see that being pretty disruptive from an ILS standpoint. In what way, I wouldn't dare to kind of presume, but it's coming in much the same way they've upended travel.
Well, did you
go ahead
directly? Did you do it all at once, or did you stagger it all at once? Wow, that's pretty brave. Or had you already proven on some level, because I'm imagining you pitching this up, that had to have been, a pretty significant presentation, especially if it was going to be ripping the Band-Aid versus we'll prove this out and then, we'll roll out, roll it across the rest of the properties.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the nuance there is that we rolled out the individual property sites because we were finding clients were wanting something, that was bright and shiny. They've got a new asset or they've got a new brand. They're rolling out, we rolled out kind of the early BTR product with Christopher Todd, and they had really broad brand expectations and wanted, very explicit websites and all these different things. And it became apparent to us that this was not the exception, but eventually going to become the rule. And what would happen is, what's really important for us is owning the Google business profile orientation relative to a property and where you point prospects from a website standpoint. And what we couldn't have happen was have all of these third-party managed property sites co-opting it used to be Google My Business. I believe it's Google Business Profiles listing, the website listing. What was really important for us was kind of maintaining the primacy of marktaylor.com as a private ILS. And by primacy, I'll give you hard data. CoStar used to share apartments.com's entire network, unique traffic data with us on a monthly basis. They've since stopped, but there were months where marktaylor.com itself generated more unique traffic than the entire apartments.com network. Now, this was 2018 era, so I won't pretend to say that's the case anymore. But it's quite an engine. And so we needed to preserve that. And if we had, 80 property Google business profiles pointing to 80 different property websites, that was going to hurt us. And we saw the appetite for these custom sites cost anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 that ultimately didn't perform for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. They're not built for mobile, right? They're replete with all this rich imagery and all these design kind of attributes and et cetera, but they don't load on mobile, and that's problematic. We knew we needed to have a alternative that was viable. So to answer your question, we rolled out the standalone websites, those individual property websites, established them, polished them. That was about a 6-month process. And then in tandem with rolling out the new marktaylor.com, we turned off ILSs.
Got it.
So it was staged. We didn't just, it was already scary.
Yeah, I bet.
It was already, yeah. In fact, I can remember my CEO at the time saying, you're really exposing yourself here. And this is how much I believed in it, because I'd spent a year studying. I said, listen, if I'm wrong, we can still go back. Number one. Number two, I will submit my resignation. This is how strongly I believe in it. He says, at that time, I think John, who is now our president, he was our president then, but he is, John Carlson leads Mark Taylor. He was literally the only person that believed this was possible as well. So fortunately, it's proven out. It was a little bit of a scary period there. But again, we haven't had to return to ILSs out of need, right? Out of necessity. In fact, I'll give you a data point that's helpful. We average about 200 active leads today per property in our CRM. So while we are, yes, out of the decade of abundance from a multifamily perspective that masked a lot of the poor performance from operators, that's no longer the case today, which is why you're going to see operators exposed, because that abundance period is over. Costs are continuing to rise, right? Payroll, et cetera, and all the associated performance induced costs, because you don't do things well, those folks are going to start to get exposed. But for us, we've had to just be really cognizant of and really simplify it. And as long as we were seeing the key metrics that we needed to, we knew we were pointing in the right direction. And so here we are, I guess 6 years later almost, where, we're coming up on our 6th year. No, we're past it. It was in October. Yeah. So we've really been cranking. and been successful with it. Go ahead. What were you going to ask, Reid?
Well, I had two questions, but maybe I should narrow it to just one because I want to be able to hit some other topics. But if there was one lesson that you could pass on to a marketer, an owner, operator listening to this about making that switch, what would it be? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. Well, number one, avoid indulging on really expensive sites that look good but don't perform to mobile requirements. That's a heavy no. Strip out all of the additional kind of cutesy, bullshit. Allow somebody to convert after a single click. Don't make your form fills too heavy. Most people are thumbing that, right? So just ask for their name, email address, phone number, maybe the unit type they're interested in. But really, really understand what Google cares about from an SEO, accessibility, performance standpoint, and really build to that. Trust that you can bring in these marketing capabilities in-house. It's something that you can do. And it can be really valuable because, we've experienced with it. And, when you utilize third-party managers, some will turn around sites very quickly. You never know what your situation may be. You may be taking over a property in 3 days. If you have a 3-week requirement to get a website up and all the feeds connected, that's going to be a challenge. And I know you guys do this piece well, so this certainly isn't you, but there's a lot of folks that was the standard. So think about the immediacy of having somebody in-house, bringing a specialist in. They will pay for themselves if you bring in the right ad strategists and the right account managers. And then really take a hard look at providers who can give you websites that, are mobile first oriented and are going to be additive. And in doing so, that is going to create a new problem for you, which is answering your phones. But that's a good problem to have. So know what your needs are, know what your goals are, come in prepared. And then when you're, pursuing partners in this space, unless you do it yourself, know what you're going to ask them. Ask them what their success metrics are. How do you justify your existence? How do you perform? Because and when I first arrived, we used to have these meetings with our third-party ad strategists, and they'd come in and say, you're averaging 4,000 uniques per property this month. And we'd be like, oh my God, this is great. And then you'd ask the next question, if you're thoughtful, and we weren't particularly at that front end period, it's, well, what's my conversion rate of unique to a lead, right? Because I only need 100 uniques if they're converting at a 20% rate, right? And so I don't need 4,000, for which most of them are paid, since at that time our website wasn't indexing well for search. So we were nowhere near page 1 of search results for organic. So if you're somebody that's listening to the podcast and you're saying, all right, where do I start with this? Owning your footprint is really important. Finding a really strong third-party partner who can help reduce your dependence on ILSs is critical. Somebody who's mobile first, that understands kind of the ever-shifting landscape of doing that well, who monitors and audits how the algorithms are changing from a search perspective, who understand the integration of now generative in that process, what that now means from an SEO and structured data, what those implications are, and really can make sure that you're always competing. Because we know it. We track our performance via Google's development tool, web.dev, and we run our sites every week through that to see what's changed. And I can tell you that things change every week. We may have a high SEO score one week. Actually, SEO doesn't change that much, surprisingly, nor does accessibility, but performance certainly does. So we can be in the high 70s and drop down to the low 30s suddenly. And you're like, holy shit, what just happened here? And so you want a partner who's paying attention to that and making sure that you have a reliable lead gen motion. And that's really critical. I mean, that's high level, but that's how you want to think about it. Think about what you care about. Have your goal be creating more qualified traffic and reducing your cost per lead, by extension, your cost per lease, your cost per unique. And if you do that well, you deploy a CRM that allows you the visibility into these different things, you're going to be able to understand how much you now need to spend to satisfy, say, an unforeseen event at your community where you had 15 residents suddenly submit notice of vacates. And now you need, not on top of the existing lease turnover, now you need 15 more leases in the next 6 weeks. And you're like, oh, holy shit, how much do I need to spend? And what you'll see is that folks will go, right or wrong, they'll make a long-term commitment to solve a short-term issue. And they'll go and sign 12 months with an ILS, or they'll go do, and it's, it's not good. What you want to be able to do is go, okay, how many leases do I need? 15? Okay, let's back into this. Do I know what my tour to lease conversion rate is? Do I know what my lead to tour conversion rate is? Do I know what my unique to lead conversion rate is? Okay, what's my cost per unique? It's $225 a unique. All right, I'm going to need 1,000 of those to yield, 50 leads that are going to convert to a tour in a 60% clip, which are going to convert to a lease at a 40% clip. And you can literally be precise with your ad spend. And yes, there's other factors. If you've had turnover in parallel on your property team, you've got some competing factors that may exacerbate this, but you can really be precise with your spend. It's incredibly helpful, especially today, where your third-party clients, your fee-based clients, they're not interested in seeing wide deviations to that agreed-upon budget. And when they do see them, it invites further scrutiny as to what else are these guys missing. You don't want to have those conversations. You want to be, and it's already a challenging conversation to have when you have to tell them that we suddenly need 15 more leases, so we need to spend X. So you want to make sure that you're reinforcing buying decision with them as well, that they've partnered with a thoughtful organization that has a real understanding of what it's going to take to not only navigate the good times, but navigate the contours of the challenging times, which are inevitable.
Well, Dustin, I think that's a good segue into my next topic, which I think will be what we have time for today. But what I've heard that third parties struggle with whether it's I'll just say centralization, but we can stick on the ILS portion if you want. But when you guys went to got rid of the ILS, as you alluded to, you hired some in-house people to also help out here. Yep. And what I've seen third parties struggle with is well, shoot, a lot of times that budget is considered part of corporate headcount, and I don't get to charge it back to the property. And then therefore they are actually cutting their margins while they're saving the the owner, the ad spend that you're talking about. So how did you guys manage through that, where you're saving the owner all this ad spend, but now you had to bring on people, which, dollar for dollar, it works out in your favor, as you said, but I've just seen other companies struggle with that.
Yeah. So let me be clear. We have providers for our websites, right? Our partner union, but we have, and this was probably should have been part of my answer to the previous question, but you want a pretty robust content management system, CMS, on the back end, so that you can manage all of the various aspects of running a potent web footprint. From a cost standpoint, you have these fixed costs, right, around your monthly website maintenance fee, your SEO fee, your ad strategy fee, and there's VIGs that are associated with all of that. These are fixed costs. And by the way, they're worth it if you have a strong partner, right? It's absolutely a peace of mind play. You just, at the end of the day, as an operator, owner, you want peace of mind. For us, by creating this marketing motion internally that offset our reliance on third party, again, our websites are still a product of a partner. But we own the management of those because we want immediacy. We can get things done. We can place a concession. We can do these different things, update pricing, whatever it may be, whatever it needs to be done. And so what you do is you paint the picture from a dollars and cents standpoint. The folks on the other side are asset managers, which is another way of saying detectives. They are truly trying to uncover wasted spend. And so if you can say, while maintaining current parity from a performance standpoint, we're going to take these fixed costs as I enumerated, and we're going to be able to strip out a portion of that cost while maintaining parity with today's performance and perhaps even improving it. That's a strong value story that helps move you forward. And for us, it's really important, as managers, if you're not going to be paying a management fee to a third party ad strategist or whatever, we aren't able to allow you to abandon that in full. We certainly have a management piece that we have that represents our monetization of this, so that we can employ these folks to do this and do this well. But the sum total picture is still very favorable for our clients. As I mentioned, they look at marketing costs per unit on an annualized basis, which can veer from $300 to $700 a unit for a community. And, some of our bigger properties that are $100 or less. And so when you tell that story, that's the story they care about. How you've engineered it or the construct thereof is less important. It's that you're able to do two things. Carve out costs and improve performance simultaneously. That's your winning ticket. And it can be done. I promise you, Phoenix is as competitive a landscape as anywhere right now. Most folks that are in this space know that in migration of Phoenix is top 3 in the country. We've got all kinds of new product coming online, 34,000 units this year and next year, for which we've only got about 12,000 units of demand. It's going to be very challenging marketplace to be successful in, specifically with new product in lease up, because it's going to be it'll be a race to the bottom from a price standpoint if you're not thoughtful about your approach. So finding savings, especially now, is incredibly important for your clients. And if you can do that while improving performance, you have the winning equation.
Got it. So on this entire effort, if you, through your 4 chapters, you talked a lot about, I'll just, again, put the overarching centralization, whether from marketing or lead handling or what have you. So how much of that does Mark Taylor get to benefit from? Meaning like it improves your guys' margin versus how much is that more of a marketing strategy, as you said, when you're pitching new clients, that it's like, hey, this is how we're different, so that they're not just hearing the same pitch from someone else.
Well, in both kind of environments, they resonate. The upside for us is that if we provide the framework for this, because otherwise you're a client, you're trying to build this community, you're also trying to figure out your brand. And so we have a full consultancy now where we've extended our centralized services for competitors. We're answering their phones for them. We do brand creation. We do market studies. We do all of these different things now in the space. And what's important for us from a client perspective is being able to say, hey, brand new brand, Mark Taylor's established. Let's borrow from the trust and the confidence and the awareness around this brand to quickly elevate your brand in partnership, that halo effect, that knock-on effect. And we'll direct flights of ad capital, of ad spend, to both digital footprints, so both marktaylor.com and your property website, so that, there's a lot of merchant builders in our space, and there's value for them from a brand standpoint, although oftentimes a transaction yields a brand change that's written into agreements, but very helpful for a client who's looking to lease up quickly and transact, to be able to say, hey, look at this digital footprint we have that yields X, Y, and it has proven to be very valuable. That's important. It's also important for clients to see that they're pushing traffic to their specific product versus just the Mark Taylor brand. Now, it's important to note that we aren't pushing, we don't direct ad traffic to the Mark Taylor homepage. It's very targeted to a specific property, right? And so we have it's not sophisticated, but we have an algorithm ourselves for determining, based on occupancy and what's something called long-term net, our 60-day forward look, absent any new leases, what would your occupancy be? That's a bit of our canary in the cage. in the cave scenario, we're able to direct ad spend to specific properties within the marktaylor.com domain. So they're not encountering Mark Taylor, they're encountering the property and its brand, right? And this is a question that comes up because if you're a thoughtful client or owner, you're like, hey, I love Mark Taylor, but why am I spending to generate awareness and traffic to Mark Taylor when I'd rather allocate it all to my property website? And so we talk them through our blended ad strategy approach. We protect brand with our, and we're hyper local with our standalones, our property websites. When we're national, we have a blended approach that dovetails well, so we're not competing in terms of driving up ad costs because we've got two property websites for the same property that are bidding for the same search queries. So we've tried to be very thoughtful there, and we go a long way to allaying their concerns because there are a lot of thoughtful clients out there who will go, and like I said, they're detectives. They are, which is great because if they're detecting good things, that's only serving you well, right? But who will ask those questions, and we certainly have an answer for that.
Got it. Cool. Well, Reid, why don't you bring us home?
Well, I have a ton more questions. Let me think what I should bring us home with.
You go to hot takes, I guess.
Yeah, David was saying hot takes. I feel like you're loaded with those, which is just more the contrarian viewpoint. How do you normalize the picture related to performance? And this is probably not the best question to ask to take us home. But what I mean by that is you have all these metrics. You said it's really important, which I was going to say maybe that will be the biggest lesson is which metrics to actually pay attention to. Because that's one of the hardest things in digital marketing and advertising, website analytics. There's so much data. And so when you're testing new strategies, and this is, we've talked a lot about, the move away from the ILSs, that's obviously a big one. But I imagine, you mentioned the conversion rate, the call data, is there a paradigm for you, Dustin or Mark Taylor, and how you guys go about trying to normalize that picture before you test? Or is it more kind of project by project and how you go about the data analysis? Again, not maybe a great one to end on, but I'm always fascinated when you kind of come across, I'll say, change agents that are really, looking at new ways of doing things and trying to prove it out through data, how they handle that part of the equation. Because a lot of times it's not easy with all the noise going on in the market, all the different technology, different strategies that are in motion. Like, how do you really distill that down and feel like you're getting an honest look at what's driving results and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really great question. Look, when I started in 2017, SEO wasn't a table side conversation, right? No, you would have asked what SEO means to folks here, decision makers here, and nobody, you would have gotten 100 different answers. The important piece is to retain focus on the strategic objectives for the organization. For us, we've gone to great lengths to simplify it. We have three core objectives, right? People, excellence, and growth. And that's the basis for all of our decision making. So, partner to all of this change, and there is a lot. You have to be able to append that to the key and known strategic objectives so that folks have context for it. Remember, you're taking, from a centralized standpoint, you're taking generalists who are asked to do a myriad of different things. And for us, disproportionately now, we have more Gen Z than we even have millennial on-prem. These are folks who want to know explicitly what is asked of them. What's next for me? What are your plans for me? Like, they want to know that they're doing well. They actually dispositionally are tuned to being specialists. They can derive more happiness from the role instead of being asked to do a million different things on any given day on-prem. So for us, the change piece was absolutely tethered to the success metrics that mattered. But in some cases, you're going to be introducing success metrics that nobody's even heard of for folks. So it was really important for us to paint a broad kind of future cast picture. So here's what good can look like for us if we do the following. in service of our three objectives, whether it's people, excellence, or growth. If we want to get here in the time frame that we've stipulated, we're going to have to do the following series of things. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to map it on a high level, while also being abundantly communicative about the fact that, hey, there's going to be some learnings, some deviations. This is theoretical today, but we're starting to see that this can happen because we've run this preview, or we've trialed this, or we've done this, and here's what we've seen back. We feel it is a statistically sizable enough data set or sample set to really paint this is what good can look like for us picture. And then you start the education process. Heavy communication on the front end is really, really important. Emphasis around each individual contributor's role within that process, so they feel a part of it. A lot of feedback. I'm not saying a lot is kind of nebulous. Just, guys, this is right. So we've got this objective. We're moving in this direction, which means the following is going to happen, impacting you in the following ways, which is great because it's going to allow you to do this, this, and this. Or it's going to expose you potentially if you're not doing those things well. But really, painting the picture as you're kind of future casting and trying to peek around the corner and allowing folks to understand and buy into what the vision is really important, so that they know what their role is, they can see it, they feel that they understand their importance in it, and they also feel comfortable raising any kind of questions or feel like there's this feedback channel where they're not going to be judged. Nobody wants to fail in full view, especially property team members who don't get a chance to collide with the corporate staff because they're on distribute. They don't want that. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want to have an additional opportunity to look bad. They don't want that. So you paint the picture of what good can look like. This is going to mean this for you. We're going to hand off qualified leads to you. No longer going to be in a conversation for an hour only to find that somebody's not qualified to rent a Class A. And you start to tether it to the things that they care about, and that becomes super helpful. But there is an educational piece, David. You are going to have to explain kind of the more nuanced aspects of what we do. And I've alluded to SEO, but SEO is broad. Has massive impact to our business. Review and rep has massive impact to our business. Seemingly inconsequential, not big deal. So being able to paint that picture thoughtfully, articulately, and then one last thing is we then arm our asset managers, we call them managing directors, with talking points and then objection handling, because not only is it new for them, but it sure as hell is new for their clients. And so you tell a client we're pulling your property off ILSs, there's a lot of red flags and warning bells that'll go off. So how do I talk about this confidently with my client and not put myself in a position of vulnerability? I'm not a marketing expert. So you've got to think about all these different scenarios and arm people with the requisite information so that they're empowered to go and coherently communicate and act as an ambassador for the effort, not only with their internal teams, but also with the clients.
Well, this has been incredibly enlightening, Dustin. I've not heard, I can't remember the last guest we had, maybe Jay from CoStar, who had as many of his KPIs like offhand. Like I just want to run through some of them for the folks that didn't write them down. But I love how you talked about that through all these efforts that you improved your answer rate from 51% to 90%. So yeah, I'm directionally correct on a lot of these, Dustin, so you don't have to get out the red pen. Then I love how you said, like in today's dollars, you're able to migrate that $4.5 million in ILS spend to other means, which that allows you to be more flexible versus getting stuck in these long-term contracts. And I love that you said that you've really worked on that. You guys even track now the 60 to 70% of the inquiries to your on-site teams are current residents versus, let's say lead handling, which shows how much where their attention goes, right? That means 2/3 of their attention is on the current residents, not on placing new ones.
That's right.
And then obviously you made it a super focus to get your guys' reputation above 4.0, which, just helps you to convert more of those leads. So I just love how tight you are with all these KPIs. I'm sure next time, I'm already predicting we'll have you on again, that you'll have more KPIs that you drop on us. So these have been great.
Yeah, I knew you guys would like them. You guys, after all, know we're fighting the same fight. and you guys are doing it quite well. So kudos to the Digible team. Appreciate
Thanks.
you guys having me on. This was really nice. I hope that this is appetizing for your audience. And if anybody has any questions or want to engage further, I'm happy. I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk about our centralization efforts. You can find me on LinkedIn or elsewhere.
Cool. So if they want to get in touch, as you're saying, they'll just go find you on LinkedIn, mention that they heard you here, and that they'd love to learn more about centralization or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've kind of plotted our path. I will share explicitly what we're doing, because at the end of the day, you still have to hike that mountain. That's still you that's got to do it. Yeah. But we've had a ton of learnings. We've made a lot of mistakes, and sometimes it's helpful just to hear, what those are, so that you can maybe, avoid some of those in the process. So feel free to reach out. Like I said, I love to chat, and I do often now. A lot of folks are starting to do that, reach out and kind of for a read on kind of our approach, and I'm happy to have that conversation. So feel free.
Oh, and I forgot a plug for you. You guys also started a podcast to share a lot of these insights as well. What's that one?
Yeah, Multifamily Forward. Check out our first season. It just dropped. Would love for you to, I'm on there as well, so you'll hear some of my stuff, similar stuff, but a deeper dive into the centralization piece specifically. First episode is myself. I think I'm starting to get a little oversaturated here in this marketplace. Maybe I need to just disappear, but check that out. I think we've got 6 episodes, and we'd love to have you. This is a big family. Multifamily for us, we count a lot of our competitive peers as really close friends, and there's enough for all of us. So we want to see folks do well. We are so pleased to see the Digibles of the world come in and do really critical pieces really well. So proud of what you guys are doing. I've been obviously rooting on Karina from afar. And I knew that her addition indicated you guys were thoughtful folks. So you guys are an important piece, for what we're doing and what we need to do in the future. So excited to be here. You guys have me on again. I'd love to give you an update in a couple, a year or so, and let you know how we're progressing from a centralized standpoint. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dustin.